You catch me today doing a bit of an SSD upgrade on my dad's computer. And you might think to yourself, that's not a particularly exciting topic for a video, and I'd agree with you there. But what's interesting about this particular computer is that I built it 10 years ago, and it's still going strong, and my dad is still using it for his day-to-day architectural work. And I think there's some interesting thoughts to come from that, so I just wanted to share those with you as I do the upgrade. Of course, because of the age of the components in this machine, there's no NVMe slot on the motherboard, so we're using a SATA SSD. And this particular one is the one that I originally installed when I built the machine. It's a Corsair drive, Corsair Force 240GB. And the only reason why we're replacing this, incidentally, is because 240 gigs just isn't enough space. Dad keeps running out of space on his system drive. So I've got this crucial MX500 1TB drive to put in, and that should solve that problem. I have to say, I have checked this drive, checked the smart data just to see how healthy it is, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. It's still going strong after 10 years of regular daily use. I find that a testament actually to just how good SSDs are got. And bearing in mind this one's a decade old, you know, the latest generation should be even more reliable. And I have said this a lot in a lot of my videos on the channel, and it often gets detractors in the comments section. Because of course I realise SSDs do fail. They're guaranteed to fail, in fact, at some point in their life. But the simple reality is that for most people, these drives will last a lifetime of the machine. Anyway, let's do the upgrade. That involves cloning the system drive to this new SSD, which is not always as straightforward as it might seem. I'm going to use a piece of third-party software called EaseUS, or EaseUS. We'll see how that works. And I guess the first challenge that I face here is deciding how to do this. I was thinking actually of putting this drive into an external USB enclosure to do the clone. But actually, I think I'm just going to unplug the spinning disk that's in here, the data drive, because that's not going to affect anything, and I'll just plug it in there to do the clone in the system. That'll probably be the fastest way to do it. I'm not even going to screw the drive in, I'm just going to hang it on the cable. Okay, I think that should work. I'm going to take the computer around to the other desk to do the install now. So I've popped round to my dad's desk just to set it up here because I've got a feeling that the graphics card that's in this machine, which is a Quadro 2000, is probably not going to drive a 4K display. I don't know that for certain. I'm just saving time by coming around here. I also tried using that EaseUS software that I mentioned, and it's not free at all. As soon as you try and use it, they want you to pay a subscription fee. So I've decided instead to go with Macrium Reflect, who do offer a free trial, so let's see how this works. So I'm just going to go through the process now of trying to clone the disk. Okay, and we're about 2 or 3 minutes in and we're at 1%, so I think this is going to be a long job. We'll just let that go. The reason that I wanted to make this video was that when looking at this computer initially, just to see what the issues were that Dad was having, I was really surprised at just how snappy it still feels. My dad's using this still to run Autodesk AutoCAD software. I think it's AutoCAD LT that he uses because he doesn't do any 3D stuff, but he is using the 2024 version of that. And this machine is still running perfectly for that purpose. It's still plenty quick enough. Now, just out of curiosity, I ran a Geekbench 6 CPU and GPU test, and the results by modern standards were pretty woeful, to say the least. We've been talking about benchmarks in recent videos, and I think this is a kind of key point, really. You could look at these scores and assume that this computer is completely useless and that you must upgrade. But that's simply not the case. This computer works fine, it still does exactly what it's supposed to do, and the reason why is because it was built with quality components in the first place. Now, when I first built this, I wanted to build my dad a quality machine, and it didn't come cheap. It's got a workstation motherboard in, it's got a Xeon processor, 32GB of RAM, and we went with that Quadro graphics card. Yeah, okay, it's not going to play any of the latest games by any stretch of the imagination, but it's perfectly fine for running these two displays, which is how Dad prefers to do his work. We went with what I thought was a big SSD at the time, 240GB, and it did in fact work for the past 10 years just fine. I did put a 3TB spinning disk in for data backup, and I think that was overkill because Dad hasn't used hardly any of that space. So it just goes to show that if you configure the machine right in the first place, you buy the right quality components, you know, good quality power supplies if you're building your own PC, that's really important. A good quality case. This particular case is a fractal design case, and It's got loads of space in it, and it's also, I don't know how well you can see this, it's got this lovely sort of acoustic foam material, and that's throughout the case. Put that back. What that does is makes the computer really quiet. And of course, these older generation Xeon CPUs don't need massive cooling. The graphics card doesn't need massive cooling. So it's a really quiet and efficient system. And it's lasted all of this time. So yes, it was an expensive setup in the first place, but just think about how much work my dad has put through this. 10 years worth of work has gone through this machine. Now that's a tool that has returned on its investment, I would say. And where do we go next with this particular PC? It's a bit difficult to upgrade. There's not really a clear upgrade path for CPU. It already has pretty much the best one in there. There's not much difference between the one I spec'd and the top range CPU. There's no need for any additional RAM. 32 gigabytes was a huge amount 10 years ago. It's still plenty today. Do we need to change the graphics card? Well, arguably that would be probably the best upgrade we could do on this system. The motherboard is PCI Express 3 and there is a X16 slot, so that does open up a number of options for GPUs that don't require an additional power connector from the power supply. And I think the best one of those would give us about 10 times the raw compute performance of the Quadro 2000. So that would be a decent upgrade. But when I say 10 times the raw compute performance, that doesn't mean that my dad will see a 10 times improvement or indeed anything close to that. It might just facilitate him being able to use a bigger resolution or a bigger display. So perhaps arguably it's not the thing that needs to be done at this point in time. Now this computer is running Windows 10 and officially it doesn't support Windows 11. But Windows 10 comes end of life in October 2025, which is still, almost 2 years away. So all in all, this computer will have lasted about 12 years as an active money-earning work tool. And I think that's pretty impressive. And I'm really proud of that. It was a well-built machine. I've got some pictures, actually, of the machine as it was being built, so you can see it minty fresh. And the lesson here, I guess, is that if we spec things up and we're not worried about having those cutting-edge benchmark numbers, if instead we just focus on what does the computer need to do for me and can it do that job, then suddenly the lifespan of our computer equipment can be really extended. And this computer won't be dead in 2 years' time. Just think about that case. It's got a Xeon processor, it's quiet, it's efficient, it's got loads of space for storage drives. It'll be a perfect candidate for installing TrueNAS on, and you could turn that box into a 10 gigabit NAS appliance for your network at a fraction of the price of going out and buying one off the shelf. In fact, I did that last year and I'm going to make a video about that which will come soon on the channel. So if you want to see how I made a 10 gigabit NAS from old server hardware that was very cheap to acquire, then please subscribe to the channel. That content's coming soon. So this computer still has life in it beyond its working lifespan for my dad. And I think that is quite refreshing, actually. I've been reviewing a lot of Apple products over the last sort of 2-3 years, and we have moved very much towards this kind of consumer computer environment where you can't upgrade anything. You've got to get your spec right from the outset. And sure, that can work. If you get your spec right, with an Apple computer, you can have it last just as long as this one. But for the majority of people, I think that's probably not the case because of the way Apple prices the upgrades when you're speccing out your machine in the first place. And also because you can't repair anything or upgrade anything anymore on the Apple Silicon machines. And I think that's really sad. And I've sat through numerous Apple keynotes where they've been talking about the environment. But the simple truth is, this is an environmentally friendly computer. By using the components and getting the maximum life out of it, and by not paying attention to the consumerism where we're constantly being told you've got to have this latest thing, you've got to have this next best Geekbench number or everything you do is wrong. In real world terms, this computer doesn't feel as slow as the numbers would suggest. And I suspect that's true of a lot of machines. And I think a lot of people go out and buy computers that are way more powerful than they actually need. And you're putting all of that money down and never seeing a return on it. It's now up to 33% on the system drive swap. I'm sure that's going to work fine. And once it does, he'll have a terabyte of space, which is going to keep this machine going for the rest of its useful life for my dad. And what was the cost of that drive? It's about $75 or thereabouts. So finished with the upgrade and pleased to report that everything worked perfectly. So thumbs up to Macrium Reflect. That's a nice piece of software. I did have to restart the machine once, but other than that, it was absolutely fine. And I've been spending a few minutes testing it. I think overall it took about 40 minutes, something like that. As you can see, the machine is just really snappy with the new drive-in. I mean, it was snappy before, but look how quickly it'll open Microsoft Edge. And it just gets me questioning these things. You know, do we need the amount of power that we think we do? You know, are we overspending on our computers? If my dad can do his work on this machine with its low scores, do used machines become more of an option? You know, could you get your work done on a machine that's, say, 5 years old and give that machine a new lease of life? Isn't that better for the environment? I'd be really interested to find out what you guys think about this. I'm also really interested to see what you think about this kind of video format. Unscripted, a simple camera setup, no studio. It's much easier for me to produce and get content done quickly. Not saying that we won't do studio content, of course we will. It's just that my main job is quite time consuming at the moment and we're struggling to get in the studio and get content up regularly. So any feedback you've got would be gratefully received. And thanks as always for all of the support you give to the channel. See you again soon for some more geekery.